Most gardeners coast through July. They water, they weed, they wait, and come October, they pay for it with empty beds and regret. What nobody knew at the time was that July is not a rest month, it is a second spring, and the old-timers who understood that harvested well into November while everyone else was done by August. There are 10 crops you can still plant right now, in July, that will produce real food before your first frost. Exact varieties, exact spacing, exact timing. Zones 5 through 8 are the sweet spot, but the logic holds across every temperate climate where summers are warm and falls are long. Horticulturist Nikki Jabber, author of The Year-Round Vegetable Gardener, built her entire reputation on this single idea, that the July planting window is the most underused lever in home food production. She is right. Extension programs at Cornell and the University of Minnesota both confirm it. One of these 10 crops is so commonly skipped in July that gardeners who miss it consistently name it their single biggest seasonal regret. It is not what you expect, but that comes later. But this story does not start with the hook event. It starts with the calendar and one date that changes everything. June 21st. The summer solstice, the longest day of the year. After that date, daylight begins to shorten. Slowly at first, just a few minutes each day. But those shortening days send a signal. Cool season crops, the ones that bolt and turn bitter in summer heat, start to behave again. Temperatures ease, stress drops, and the crops that struggled in May and June suddenly thrive. Here is what makes July genuinely different from a second attempt at spring. The soil is already warm. In zones 5 through 8, July soil temperatures typically sit between 70 and 80 degrees Fahrenheit. That warmth is a gift. Seeds that took 10 to 14 days to germinate in cold April soil can sprout in 5 to 7 days in July. You are not starting from scratch. You are starting from an advantage. The ground has been absorbing heat since March. It has been building toward this moment for 4 months. And now it is ready to work for you in a way it simply could not in early spring. Push your finger an inch into July soil, and you can feel it. That stored warmth, dense and dry. Nothing like the cold clench of April ground. The biology underground is already running at full speed. Microbial activity is high. Earthworms are working deep. The whole system is primed. Now count forward. In zones 5 through 8, the first hard frost typically arrives somewhere between late September and mid-November, depending on your specific location. That gives you 10 to 14 weeks from July 1st. 10 to 14 weeks is enough time to grow a full crop of beans, cucumbers, carrots, beets, radishes, and more. Nikki Jabber calls this window the backbone of fall productivity. Charlie Nardozzi, garden editor and longtime contributor to the National Gardening Association, agrees. He identifies midsummer sowing as the single highest leverage action a home gardener can take all season, not the spring planting, not the fall cleanup, the July sowing. That is the move that separates the gardeners who eat well in October from the ones who are buying grocery store tomatoes by September. The Minnesota Extension Service lists July 1st through July 15th as the optimal window for direct sowing brassicas destined for fall harvest. Cornell Cooperative Extension echoes that guidance for the northeastern United States. This is not folk wisdom. This is documented, tested, confirmed. The research exists. The data is there. Most gardeners just never go looking for it because the cultural assumption that summer is for maintaining, not planting, is so deeply embedded that it feels like fact. It feels like gravity. It feels like something that was always true and always will be. But it is not a law, it is a habit. And habits can be broken. July is not the end of the gardening season. It is the beginning of the second one. And the gardeners who know that eat better in October than most people eat in August. The first crop in. It is the first week of July. The spring garden is winding down. Beds are opening up. The pea vines have been pulled. The lettuce bolted 2 weeks ago and came out last Tuesday. There is bare soil in front of you, warm and loose, and somewhere in a seed packet at the back of a drawer, there is a variety called Provider Bush Bean. 50 days to harvest, direct sow, no trellis needed. Most gardeners walk right past it. They assume the season is over. They look at that empty bed and see the end of something. This is where the story takes a turn nobody expected. Bush beans are one of the most forgiving, fastest producing vegetables you can grow. 50 to 60 days from seed to harvest, that is the number that matters. Sow on July 1st in Zone 6, and you are picking beans by late August. Sow on July 15th, and you are still harvesting well into September, weeks after your neighbors have given up on fresh vegetables entirely. That is not a small thing. That is 4 to 6 additional weeks of productivity from beds that would otherwise sit empty, collecting weeds and drying out in the August heat. Here is how you do it. Direct sow. No transplanting, no starting indoors, no babying. Push seeds 1 inch deep, 3 inches apart, in rows about 18 inches apart. Water them in firmly so the soil makes contact with every seed. In warm July soil, germination happens fast, often within 5 to 7 days. You will walk out one morning and see a row of pale green arches pushing up through the surface, each one a seed that cracked open and decided to move. The cotyledons are still folded together like hands in prayer, pulling themselves free of the soil crust, and within 24 hours they will have opened flat and started reaching for light. Compare that to a cold May planting, where you wait 2 weeks just to see a sprout, watching the soil and wondering if anything is happening down there at all. The soil has already done the work of warming up. You are simply taking advantage of it. Variety selection matters here. Not every bush bean is built for a July sowing. You want fast-maturing varieties with proven performance in warm soil. Provida is the standard. It has been a reliable workhorse in American home gardens since the 1960s, developed specifically for its disease resistance and consistent germination across a wide range of conditions. Contender is another strong choice, slightly longer at 55 days but known for exceptional flavor and tolerance to heat during germination. The pods are smooth and round, the kind that snap cleanly and hold their color when you blanch them. Top Crop rounds out the list, a 50-day variety that the University of Illinois Extension has recommended for decades as a dependable late-season producer. All three are widely available. All three are worth growing. There is another reason to plant bush beans in July that most gardeners never consider: pest pressure. The Mexican bean beetle is one of the most destructive insects in the summer vegetable garden. It peaks in late June and early July, targeting spring-planted beans at exactly the wrong time. The adults chew ragged holes through leaves. The larvae, which look like small yellow spiny grubs, work the undersides of leaves in clusters, skeletonizing entire leaflets in a matter of days. A July sowing sidesteps that peak pressure almost entirely. By the time your plants are up and leafing out, the beetle population is declining. You get a cleaner crop with less intervention. No spraying, no row covers, no hand-picking larvae off the undersides of leaves at 6 in the morning while the dew is still on everything and your knees are wet from kneeling in the grass. The plants come up into a quieter garden, one where the worst of the insect pressure has already moved on, and they grow without the constant assault that exhausts spring plantings before they ever hit their stride. The full harvest window also brings something spring beans rarely get: cooler nights. Bush beans harvested in September have a noticeably different texture than their summer counterparts. Firmer, crisper, the kind of snap that makes you stop and actually taste what you just picked. Cooler temperatures slow the conversion of sugars to starch, which means the beans stay tender longer on the plant and hold better after harvest. This is not anecdotal, it is plant physiology, and it is one of the reasons experienced market gardeners deliberately schedule a second bean planting every single year. They are not doing it because they ran out of spring beans, they are doing it because the fall beans are better. Spacing and succession matter too. If you have the bed space, consider 2 short rows sown a week apart rather than 1 long row all at once. That staggered approach spreads your harvest window by 10 to 14 days and prevents the all-at-once glut that leaves you blanching and freezing beans at midnight in late August, standing over a pot of boiling water in a hot kitchen, wondering why you planted so many at once. Sow the first row July 1st, sow the second row July 8th or July 10th. By the time the first row is producing heavily, the second row is just hitting its stride. You pick steadily for 3 weeks instead of desperately for 1. One more thing. Bush beans fix nitrogen. They are legumes, which means they pull nitrogen from the air and deposit it in the soil through root nodules. A fall bean planting does not just feed you, it feeds the bed. When you pull those plants in October, you are leaving behind a slightly richer soil than you started with. The nodules break down over winter and release their stored nitrogen slowly, making it available to whatever you plant in that bed next spring. You are not just harvesting food, you are building the garden forward. You are making a deposit into next year's account without spending $1 on fertilizer. A July bean planting can outperform a May planting in both yield and pest resistance simply because of timing. That is not a complicated idea, but it is one that most gardeners never act on because the cultural assumption that July is too late is so strong, it overrides the evidence sitting right in front of them. The clock was already ticking, the bean beetle population was already peaking in June, and the gardeners who waited until July to sow had no idea they were accidentally making the smarter move. But the real question is what happens when you push past beans into crops that seem even less likely to succeed in July. The same instinct that built the case for July beans was about to challenge everything most gardeners believe about cucumbers in late summer. The fresh start. It is midsummer. The garden beds are tired, and the cucumber plants that went in back in May are telling on themselves. Look closely at those spring cucumbers. The leaves are yellowing at the edges, starting with the oldest growth at the base of the vine and working upward. Powdery mildew is creeping up the stems like frost in reverse, white and chalky, dulling every surface it touches. Aphid colonies have set up permanent residence on the undersides of every leaf, soft green clusters that multiply faster than you can knock them off with a hose. The vines are still technically alive, but they are producing less and less with each passing week. The fruit that does set is smaller. Some of it is bitter. The harvest that felt abundant in June has slowed to a trickle. Most gardeners look at this and think it is just what cucumbers do. They accept the decline. They stop expecting much. They start planning for next year. But here is what they do not realize. The plant is not failing because cucumbers are difficult. The plant is failing because it has been fighting since April. It has been fighting cold soil, early pests, fluctuating temperatures, and the full pressure of peak spring insect populations. By July, it is exhausted, and exhausted plants do not produce, they survive. The turning point is this: a July planted cucumber does not carry any of that baggage. It goes into warm soil. It germinates fast. It misses the first wave of cucumber beetles entirely. Those beetles, the striped and spotted varieties that spread bacterial wilt and chew cotyledons down to nothing, peak in late spring and early summer. A July sowing lands after that peak. The plants come up into a garden where the worst of the pressure has already passed. That single advantage changes everything. A fresh plant in warm soil hits the ground running in a way a stressed spring plant simply cannot match. And what nobody saw coming was how dramatically the pest pressure difference would show up in the harvest numbers. The window July 1st. A gardener direct sows a short row of Space Master cucumbers along a south-facing fence. The soil temperature is 78 degrees. The seeds go in 1 inch deep, 6 inches apart, pressed firmly into the warm earth. Germination happens in 5 days. 5 days. Compare that to a May sowing where cold soil drags germination out to 2 weeks or longer, leaving seeds vulnerable to rot and fungal attack the entire time they are sitting there waiting. The July seeds are up and moving before most problems even have a chance to find them. By day 10, the seedlings have their first true leaves, small, slightly rough, the texture of fine sandpaper, reaching toward the fence. By day 20, the tendrils are reaching, finding the wire, beginning to climb. Each tendril makes contact with the fence and coils around it within hours, a tight spiral grip that tightens as the vine grows heavier. The plant is moving fast, adding several inches of new growth each day in the July heat, and there is nothing tentative about it. The math here is not complicated. Space Master matures in roughly 60 days. Sow in early July and you are pulling cucumbers by early September. Sow in mid-July and you are still harvesting well into September, sometimes pushing into early October depending on your first frost date. That is a full second cucumber season that most gardeners are not even attempting, and the plants doing it are healthier, less stressed, and more productive per vine than their spring counterparts. But the cucumber was not done yet. Not even close. The variety choice matters more than most people account for. Space Master is compact and fast, bred for small gardens and container growing, with vines that stay manageable even when they are producing heavily. Bush Pickle is bred for exactly this kind of intensive late-season production, short internodes, concentrated fruit set, fast turnaround. Straight 8 is a classic that handles summer heat without losing its mind, producing long, smooth fruit with reliable consistency. All three hit that 50 to 65 day maturity window that makes a July sowing viable. Longer season varieties are a gamble. Stick to the fast ones and the math works in your favor every time. The moment a gardener realizes their July cucumbers are outperforming their May cucumbers is genuinely disorienting. The May plants are limping. The July plants are exploding. Same garden, same soil, same seeds even, different timing. That is the entire lesson. Right there in one comparison. The reckoning September arrives. The spring cucumbers are long gone, pulled out weeks ago and composted. The July plants are at peak production. The vines are clean, no mildew, no yellowing, no aphid colonies crowding the leaf axils. The fruit is coming in fast, smooth and dark green, the kind that makes a clean sound when you tap it. The skin is firm and tight, with no soft spots, no bitterness, no hollow centers. You can pick 6 or 8 cucumbers from a single vine on a single morning and come back 2 days later to find 6 more waiting. And there is something almost unfair about how easy it looks. The lesson is not subtle. Late summer is not the enemy of cucumbers. Early planting pressure is. The gardeners who figured this out are not doing anything radical. They are simply starting over at the right moment. They are treating July not as the end of cucumber season, but as the beginning of a second one. They are looking at the calendar differently than everyone around them. There is one more thing worth saying here. Transplanting 3-week-old starts works just as well as direct sowing in July. If you start seeds indoors in mid-June, you have transplant-ready seedlings right when the July window opens. The roots are established, the plants are stocky, and they take off within days of going in the ground. Both methods work. The key is getting something in the ground before that window closes. Miss it, and you are waiting until next year. For a while, things actually seemed fine. The spring garden was still producing, the summer felt long, and there was no urgency. That did not last. The setup. It is late June. A seed packet sits on a potting bench, slightly dusty, pushed to the back behind the tomato stakes and the bag of fertilizer. The label reads Nantes. Most gardeners walk right past it. Carrots in July sounds like a mistake. It sounds like the kind of thing someone tries once, fails at, and never attempts again. The assumption is almost universal. Carrots are a spring crop. You sow them in April, you thin them in May, you pull them in June or early July. That is the cycle most people know. And the version you have heard, that is not the full picture, because what that version leaves out is the full carrot. The one that goes in the ground in July and comes out in October. The one that has been sitting in cooling soil for weeks, slowly converting its starches into sugars as the nights get longer and the temperatures drop. The one that tastes completely different from anything you pulled in June. The gamble. July 5th. The soil temperature is 82 degrees. A gardener opens a packet of Chantenay seeds and starts to sow, pressing them into shallow furrows 1/4 inch deep, spacing them an inch apart in rows 8 inches wide. The seeds are tiny, smaller than a grain of rice, lighter than almost anything else in the seed drawer, and they disappear into the soil almost immediately. You have to trust that they are there. You have to trust the furrow depth and the spacing and the moisture, because once they are covered, there is nothing to see and nothing to adjust. The first challenge is immediate: heat. Carrot seeds are small and slow, and they need consistent moisture to germinate. July soil dries out fast. The top inch of soil can go from moist to bone dry in a matter of hours on a hot afternoon, especially in a raised bed or a sandy loam that drains quickly. And dry soil means failed germination. It means wasted seed. It means starting over with a shorter window and less confidence. This is the moment most gardeners give up on the idea before it even gets started. They try once, the seeds dry out, and they conclude that July carrots are impossible. But the solution exists, and it is not complicated. Shade cloth laid directly over the seedbed holds moisture and drops soil temperature by several degrees, creating a microclimate just cool and damp enough for germination to take hold. A layer of straw mulch does the same thing, trapping moisture at the surface and shading the soil from direct afternoon sun. Either method buys the seeds enough time to germinate without drying out. Check the bed daily. Water gently with a fine mist, not a hard stream that washes seeds sideways. Keep that top inch consistently moist until the seedlings are up and showing their first feathery true leaves. Once they are up, the hard part is over. The roots are moving downward into cooler, more stable soil, and the plants can begin to take care of themselves. And the timing of what happened next was almost too perfect, because right around the time those July sown carrots are establishing their root systems and beginning to push downward through the warm soil, the carrot fly pressure that plagued the spring sowing has largely disappeared. The first generation of carrot flies peaks in late spring, laying eggs at the base of young plants and sending larvae tunneling through the roots, leaving rusty brown channels through the flesh that make the carrots unsellable and barely edible. The second generation, which arrives in late summer, is significantly lighter. A July sowing slides right into the gap between those two pressure windows. Less pest damage, cleaner roots, better yields. The timing that seemed risky turns out to be protective. The turning point comes in late September. The soil temperature is dropping. Nights are cool and clear. The kind of nights where you can see your breath in the morning. And something is happening underground that no one can see yet. The carrot roots are changing. The plant, sensing the approach of cold, begins converting stored starches into sugars as a kind of biological antifreeze. It is a survival mechanism, an ancient response to shortening days and dropping temperatures. But for the gardener, it is a flavor transformation. October carrots pulled from cooling soil taste noticeably sweeter than anything harvested in the heat of early summer. It is not a subtle difference. It is the difference between a carrot that tastes like a carrot and one that tastes like something worth eating raw, standing in the garden, right there in the dirt, with the soil still on your hands and the cold morning air sharp in your lungs. The harvest. October arrives. The Nantes carrots have been in the ground for roughly 70 days. They are ready. The soil is loose and cool, and the roots pull clean with a firm, steady tug. No snapping, no breaking, just a smooth release from the earth. The shoulders are orange-red, and the tips are tapered and clean. The skin is smooth and unbroken, with none of the forking or cracking that comes from uneven moisture in summer soil. You hold one up, and it catches the October light, dense and bright, and it is nothing like the pale, slightly woody carrots that came out of the same bed back in June. And the gardener, who almost did not bother with the July sowing, is standing in the garden, holding something that justifies every careful watering, every morning check of the seedbed, every moment of doubt when the seeds seem to be taking too long. Nantes and Chantonnay are the varieties to reach for here. Both mature in 65 to 75 days. Both handle the transition